Hi there, this is Ranbir Puar. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I have the most incredible special guest today, somebody I admire, and I just love witnessing the work that she does in our community, in our parenting community, with our kids and the grown-ups. And her name is Dr. Vanessa Lapointe. She's here with me today. You can see her on the other side of the screen. So I'm going to read a little bit about Dr. Vanessa Lapointe for you. She is an author, parenting expert, registered psychologist, and she has been supporting families and children for more than 15 years. She's actually the author of 2 books, which I have here with me: Discipline Without Damage, How to Get Your Kids to Behave Without Messing Them Up. #1 goal, right? And then her latest book, which is so important for you to read if you're a parent or a grandparent even, it's Parenting Right from the Start. And it's laying a healthy foundation in the baby and toddler years. So that is a must read and must get. And Vanessa has also been a parenting contributor to sites like Huffington Post Parent. She consults on research projects. She speaks around the world, and oh my gosh, she's here with us. So excited. So thank you.
Thank you. I love that I'm here. I love every chance I get to chat with you.
Oh, thank you so much. So Vanessa and I actually met a few years ago at Leading Moms. We were both speaking at the event. And sometimes you come across people that you feel like you've known a lifetime. Mm-hmm. And we have that connection. And we were just talking before we hit record on this interview, talking about, did I tell you this already, or was that in some other sort of state where I felt like I talked to you about this particular thing? So sometimes that happens, and when it does, you gotta run and grab it, right?
That's right. Part of the soul pack.
Soul pack. So we have really similar philosophies. We both are moms of 2 boys, and your kids are about the same age as mine, right? Tell me a little bit about them.
Yeah, so they're 13 and 16 now. Yeah. They are giant. Like, I don't even know how I grew them.
Yeah.
And they are, you know, they keep me humble every day, and they inspire me every day. Every time they're in a new sort of developmental age or stage, I think, oh, this is my favorite. You know, they're just such a blessing to my life, and so incredible as human beings.
So incredible. And you know what I love? My son, Isaac, is going to turn 16 next week. At the time of this recording, he's not quite, but he's almost 16. And my younger son will be 13 in November. So they're the same ages. And what I find is really interesting is that I look at them at their different stages and ages, and I can't help but feel this sort of, sometimes I don't know how to describe it, like this overwhelming flow in my body where I remember things from when I was their age. And I found that in here, and the idea of growing them, but also growing you. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. And so, you know, well, here's the honest to goodness truth. When I found out I was pregnant with my first son, which is a little bit of a challenging pregnancy, and I had not expected it. I was a doctoral student at the time. And so It was a little bit of a surprise blessing to my life. And I thought, you know what? No problem. Yeah. Like, I've got this graduate degree. I know everything there is to know about child development. I got this in the bag. I'm going to be such a good mom. And then my child was born, and I was like, oh, snap. I don't know what just happened, but I suddenly felt, you know, so overwhelmed. Like, he was like 5 hours old, and I already thought I'd wrecked him, and had all of this guilt and all of these things happening. And then, you know, I started to walk through my journey with him, and then his brother came along. And one of the things that I realized is that our children come into our lives for us. They come as sort of messengers that bring the lessons to us that we are here to learn. And so as they go through different things, what happened for me and what I witnessed in so many of my clients is that it awakens in you the inner child who maybe you know, at that age and stage felt very overwhelmed, or at that age and stage felt very unseen, or at that age and stage felt like life was unfair, or they had to perform to be loved, or whatever it was. And you can feel all of these things awakening. And, you know, even now at 13 and 16, because they're going through some very monumental things as part of that stage of life. And I find myself like right back there and thinking, what is up with me today? And then I think, oh, I remember this time.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm glad I'm not alone in that, because it really, I can feel it. And I look at them, and I practice a certain style of parenting that I just feel like I do it intuitively. So I haven't done the studies, but it's an intuitive way of parenting. And what my initial goal in the beginning, when Isaac was first born 16 years ago, was to do the opposite of what I thought my parents did, because I assumed that was going to be a slam dunk. And then, so that's what a lot of us might think. Just do what they didn't do, or do the opposite of what they did do. And when I had to start looking at that, I had to start looking at actually what they did right for me. I had to start actually giving credit where credit was due, and then also looking at ways where maybe it was my initiative to be the victim. Maybe I was choosing that, and how did that feed me and fuel me? And I used my victim story, as many of us do. So if you're listening to this and watching this, don't beat yourself up for it. Just acknowledge it. And you would, I mean, you and I have talked about this a lot. It's that audit and that acceptance of, I'm using this for fuel, that can help you make the first step in changing. Yeah. It's just like that navigation system in your car. You can't decide the route before you put in the entry point.
That's right.
So I know most people talk about the end point. I want to go here, I want to do this. And I'm like, no. Well, where are you starting? So, so that helped me a lot in getting to know me and grow me. And it is not for the faint of heart, as you and I have talked about. Sometimes I look at some of the choices I made, and I can't even recognize myself. Yeah. Right? The difference between pre-victim and post-victim, using it as motivation. But my victim story did help me achieve things in my life. Right. And tell me a little bit about that, and why you feel like that might be hard for parents to let go of when they're growing themselves.
I often think about it in terms of like opposites. And so whenever there's big darkness somewhere, actually, you put this beautiful post on Instagram, I think it was yesterday. It was a quote of Brene Brown's about the darkness juxtaposed to light is what has the light sing out. And so whenever there's big darkness, I always think that there is equal opportunity or potential for there to be light on the other side of that. So big dark, big light. And so when we are growing ourselves and growing our children, and we're fallen into that victim kind of place, understand that within that there is potential, because you can harness the deep dark depths of the energy that's flowed towards your victim understanding of self. And with a transformation of that program, you then elevate that into, and I love the word that you use as the other side of victim, which is victor. And so if you can think about that energy getting transformed into the energy of the victor, and you can understand that all of those things that you journeyed through, maybe as a child, that you've journeyed through in your adult life as the wake-up calls started to come and you stayed asleep, and then they got louder, and now you got this kid who's making you crazy every single day. Right? So the wake-up calls get louder and louder and louder. And if you think about the opportunity for learning, it's not happening to you. It is happening for you. And as soon as you can get that, and I remember, you know, I've had a few very significant moments in my life where it's like somebody peeled back the curtains. Like I saw through the illusion into the truth of what it was that was happening. And it is all systems go.
Yeah.
You can really harness it and transform it into something that you use for yourself. You know, and it's not like it's a straight line. You're like, oh, cool.
No, 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 no. No, 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 no.
And, you know, through the darkest um, um, nights of the soul that I've had, I have come through on the other side of this with my biggest learning and biggest surges in terms of transformation. So there's power in that.
So much power. I would have, you know, if I was to go back and use myself as the reference, I was very much the wild horse. You know, I had a lot of juice, but if it wasn't used properly, I could destroy anything and everything around in me and around me.
Yes.
And parenting is that one experience where I had to decide, do I want the storms that brew in me to descend on my kid? Do I want that? Do I choose that? What can I do to stop that? And then I realized that the wild horse trained is the one that wins the race.
That's right.
Right? Like that's the one you bet on if you can train it. So how can I train myself? And it's through resources like this. It's through reading information like this that you as the parent who's ever watching this can get tools and techniques. And sometimes it's just the spark of the idea that of possibility, that the idea that actually responsibility and power, you already have those things and you can choose to grow you. Because a lot of us forget, because we're walking around like little kids in big people bodies, we forget that because we're the parent this time in this cycle,
yeah,
they can. And how do they do that? Like, what would you say to somebody who is saying, I recognize it, so they know the beginning point of the navigation system? What's the journey?
Yeah. And I think, you know, there isn't a one size fits all.
Yes.
And the journey will always involve a very significant degree of going inside. And so for me, the journey has been a lot about observing my mind and observing my thoughts. And oftentimes we have thoughts and then we make them real. You know, my kid is manipulating me. My child should not be doing that. My co-parent should. My co-parent should not. You know, we have all of these thoughts and then we make them real. And for me, the most powerful thing, which I've worked at through a variety of channels, has been to question the thought. Is the thought true? Have I given the thought meaning that doesn't actually exist? And if I have, where is it that the meaning came from?
Yes.
What about my past would explain that this has become my lens through which I have viewed this situation and my life, right? And so when I can start to understand those pieces of myself, what my subconscious programs are, if I operate from a place of guilt, if I operate from a place of lack, if I operate from a place of overwhelm, if I operate from a place of performance, whatever it is, when I understand those inner programs and I train my mind to question my thoughts, then I get to choose. Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom to choose. You choose your response. You choose your feeling. You choose your emotion. You choose everything from inside that space.
And it's really, really incredibly difficult because we've to say, I'm choosing that. And so it's just, I had to keep, when I was going through my transformation of thought and growing myself, I had to say to myself, I'm choosing this bad thought. And I would just say, I'm choosing it. I want to think this right now. You know what, to everything else. This is what I want to think about. This is what I want to feel. And then I found myself being benefiting from the human consciousness that said to me after a while, well, why would you want that? So I gave myself permission to feel like the victim. I gave myself permission to say, that's what I feel. That's what I want to choose. That's what I want to focus on. But thank goodness for that consciousness, because that is what saved my butt. Because otherwise I wouldn't have asked myself, why do I keep choosing that? And it's similar to dig for is exactly what you're talking about. Where does that story come from? Why am I thinking that? Why do I want to believe that? What does that say about me? What vow have I taken to my victim story that I'm afraid if I say this, that I'm being dishonest to my victim's story, or I'm pretending like that horrible thing I experienced as a kid didn't exist. And some of us think we have to keep feeling that way in order for us to justify the pain that we feel, and we can't let it go, right? It's a lot of, sorry, I went off in a whole different thing, but that's a lot to process for people. Like it's, and you were talking, it's not a straight line. No. What kind of line is it?
It's a line that looks like this.
Yeah, pretty much.
And we really are, I catch myself saying often, we are all the ages that we have ever been.
Great.
Right. And so you always have like different parts of yourself that are coming out to play. And when you're really angry about something, because I'll be like, oh, Vanessa, you should really question that thought. And then I have this other voice that says, I don't want to question that thought. I just want to be angry right now.
Yeah.
And so I think about that as like my child self and my grown-up self. Yeah. And then I think about, if you were really angry as a little child, and somebody said, that's enough. That's unacceptable.
Yes.
What happens to the child who's told that's enough, that's unacceptable? And then I take that thought and I bring that to the work that I do with my inner child, which you resist will persist.
Yes.
And so I hear you. Of course you're angry. Of course that feels unfair. Of course that's not the way that you wanted it to go to my 3-year-old self or my 6-year-old self. That must feel very awful. You must be really angry about all of that. And to hear that out, well, my adult self swoops in as the alpha in the situation and scoops up the child. And here's the child from within, so that child then doesn't have to get so loud and jumpy all the time. That child begins to come to a space of emotional rest from within the adult. And imagine now, as a parent or a teacher or a grandparent or whatever kind of big person you happen to be, you now have like an inner child who by and large is existing in a much more settled state. And then your child comes home from school and tells you how mean the other kids were to them that day, or your spouse says something to you, or whatever it is. You feel the little jump up, but then I got you. Now you get to show up and be present.
There's so much value in that, and I think what we forget, and I mean, there's a fine line, that people get confused about often, and even when I talk about the idea of using your creative visualization, because in that experience, you need to use your creative visualization to visualize yourself, to feel those feelings of your inner child, and to hold her close, in our case, her close, and to talk to her and create that safety. And it is okay to use your creative imagination to work for you that way. Wouldn't you agree? Because I think some people think, well, if like that's not real, and how, like, what sort of tips and tricks would you give the sort of, not black and white thinker, but we're so trained to sort of shut off this knowing we have, sixth sense we have as humans to fit in the marketing cube that we have. Either we're in this cube of logic and intelligence and science and validation, or we're in this like woo-woo cube of spirituality, and there's no fact, or everything's fiction. How do we bring that feeling of knowing as and the spirituality and the healing and the creative visualization stuff into that. What's a safe way for someone to do that really didn't want any of the
any of the woo stuff?
The woo stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes we have to, just kind of like lean into it. So there is a certain amount of faith, as the word of the day, that comes with choosing to lean into those experiences and choosing to acknowledge that inner child might exist. And what I have found, especially for, the thinkers among us for whom this just feels like, what?
What is she talking about, Willis? Sorry.
Come again? Is to try and go a little bit more concrete and tangible.
Yes.
And so things like, think about the last time you were really triggered. And when I say triggered, what I mean is you were like, really angry about or really hurt about something, and then recall the moment, and as that thought lands, think instantly about what has happened in your body right now. And what will happen, and I'm just going to tell you the end of the story, is that there will be some kind of a physical sensation that's come up for you. You might find that it lands here. You might find that it's in your chest. You might find that it's in your gut. But it'll land somewhere in your body. And then understand that's where she lives or he lives.
Yes.
And so for me, it often comes up in my upper gut, in my chest. And so I just say, oh, there you are.
Yeah.
And you can literally put your hands on your body, and then you can feel that you're holding yourself in that way. I love the idea of finding a picture of yourself from childhood, where you can have that picture on your bedstand or in your bathroom beside where you brush your teeth, and you say, good morning.
Yeah. I keep mine in my favorites on my phone.
Yes.
Because when I'm triggered, I'll go look up the picture. And you and I haven't talked about this, but I do that. I'll look up the picture and go, hey, girl. But the body part
I have the same file in my phone.
Oh, the little girl file. But the body part, I think, I just want to sit with that a little bit because it's so significant. And the reason I feel like I want to come back to that and dig a little deeper with you on that is because most of us are told, our thoughts create our world, and we have this, and I always joke, I'm like, your head might create, your head creates the thoughts, but your body carries it around. So, be good to it and care for it. And then the saying, the longest distance in the world is from the head to the heart. And if you think about that journey is opening up the conversation between the mind and the body, there is, for the people that do want science and facts and information, there's so much data on the mind-body connection. And so what Dr. Vanessa is talking about here is go look into that if you need more validation on it, but also just see how you feel. Try it on for size. For me, the triggers are like nausea and always in my tummy. So I have to, when I feel those things coming, sometimes it's not even somebody I know. I could be with somebody who's just talking and they're talking in a certain way and I can feel it come up in my body. And because I've practiced this, I'm actually aware that this isn't about what's happening now. This is my fear state trying to talk to me. So it's so incredible.
And to make it tangible,
this
kind of very fairy idea, and you have to be able to bring it to the body and bring it to your concrete reality to begin to travel the journey, and to have that be a fluid kind of thing that you can then go to on a regular basis.
There's something else I want to talk to you about, which we didn't talk about before. It just came in my mind, and you had posted something recently, and it's stuff I think about sharing a lot. When I see comments that parents make that are put downs to children or their children in public, I look at that and I have to admit I feel rage inside. Not judgment, but I feel this rage because I feel like I'm here on this planet to serve children in a certain way and to build family in a certain way. And I think that doesn't go in the direction you want to go as a human, let alone as a parent. What do you think? What do you think makes people want to post those sort of derogatory put downs to children, or how hard parenting, like not the how hard parenting is, but I've survived this, or and the kids are constantly hearing this. Like I'll sit with parents and I'll hear sometimes, just in casual settings, not in coaching settings, where I'll hear them say, I just got to get away from this kid, or I can't handle, and the kid's sitting right there hearing it. How do you stop those things from happening, not as a third party, but if you're the parent that's constantly thinking like that? No judgment about that parent, because gosh, you're trying, you're listening to this video, you've watched this far, you're looking for some tips and tricks and tools. That's the person that needs a little advice, I think.
Right. And so really get that when you have those kinds of thoughts about your children, or anyone really, but in this context, children,
yeah,
that is not your adult self speaking.
Right.
That is a child version of you.
Mm.
And so you feel overwhelmed by your child, and your instinctual response is, I must get away.
Yeah.
When have you felt that feeling before? Because it is not new.
No.
Your child did not bring that feeling to your life. That feeling existed long before your child ever came into this lifetime.
Yeah.
And so where has it come from?
Yeah.
And put the focus of that really on where it belongs, which is you learned to feel that way because of something that occurred for you in childhood. And now it's being stirred up on the inside of you as you grow your child. And then imagine the struggles that you have had as an adult.
Mm.
Imagine all of the trials and all of the tribulations and all of the dark nights of the soul that you've experienced as an adult.
Yeah.
And imagine that if you were to change the thought pattern within that led you initially to think, I got to get away from this kid, I'm just surviving parenthood, whatever it is, that led you to think that. If you were to really dig into that and transform that, you actually in real time change the field all around that your child is growing in.
Yes.
It means that by virtue of changing a thought, you change that child's lived experience of being human, and you actually begin to give them a childhood that they then will not have to go on and recover from.
That's amazing. Because that's, deep inside all of us, that's what we want. We don't want our kid to have to go to therapy because we were the parent that they got, right? Like we want them to, we want to do a little bit better than the generation before us. And I was thinking a lot about this too, like how do you transform? And I started to go with the theme to learn to like your family versus love, because if I think about all the people that I love, I'm not always the best version of myself for those people, because for some strange reason, we tend to do that with people we love. We tend to be a little bit rough around the edges. So my philosophy has been learn to like yourself, learn to like your family, improving those relationships under your roof. So if you were to say and to share your top tip, and because when I say under your roof, I mean, we have families that live under multiple homes. And so it's just a matter of, it's just sort of a metaphor for that family unit, however it exists in however many homes. What would be your advice for parents and kids that might be watching this about learning to like your family? Like what would be the number one place to start from your perspective?
Yeah. And so when you are a child, it actually is your parents' job to create an environment and an experience for you that is conducive to growth.
Yes.
And here's the hard, cold truth, y'all. When you become an adult, it is no longer anybody else's job to create an environment and an experience conducive to growth. It is your job to do that for yourself. And so now, when we take that part of ourselves, like radical self-acceptance and self-accountability.
Yes.
And not just, self-acceptance and accountability.
No.
radical
Yeah.
self-acceptance and accountability. And I know you're a Rumi fan, so,
So
I'm
much.
going to butcher this quote, but maybe you remember it exactly. It's something along the lines of, out beyond right doing and wrongdoing, there is a field.
I'll meet you there.
That's right. That's where your children live and grow. Yeah. That's where you're living and growing. And so then I think about the family system as that field. Mm-hmm. And I'm divorced from the father of my children. Yeah. I'd be lying to you if I said that he didn't still make me crazy on some days. And I know that the field between he and I is the field in which my children are growing, our children are growing. It is essential that I come to a space of loving relationship, even if it's not in the physical form. You know, I don't ever have to speak that to him, but I get to grow that within me. And he gets to be whoever he is. I choose to be love on the inside of me. I choose to, you know, there's things from my own childhood that maybe weren't ideal, that were painful, that I struggled through. And my parents would have been the creators of that environment and those experiences. And I choose to see that through the lens of love. I choose to see how incredibly strong they were in the life path that they were able to carve out. I choose to understand that they were who they were because of the childhoods that they lived through, and that their parents in turn were who they were because of the childhoods that they lived through. And I'll tell you what, in all of those things, there are stories that would bring you to your knees with grief and compassion.
1,000%. Actually, it makes me think of how judgmental I was of my parents when I was, you know, before I became a parent. But I remember the night that my mom was passing away. And I don't share this very often publicly, but, you know, I was meditating with her in the room. She was there and she was very sleepy. And as I was meditating, I saw this little girl, and I've got my eyes closed right now because I just love being able to see it again. I saw this little girl running through wheat fields. And then in that moment, I realized, oh my gosh, I never considered the idea of my mom as a little girl until that very moment. Here I am, just before she's passing away, where I thought, wow, she was little too. And when we think about that, how it can bring you to your knees with compassion and grief, how we often expect so much from these people and these relationships that we don't always want to give ourselves. You know, we are not willing to do the work, but we want them to do the work. It's not the yin and the yang, the black and the white, the light and the dark, you know, and it's all of that coming togetherness and saying, we are all beautiful and flawed, and let's meet in that field. Like when I hear that Rumi quote that you reference, I feel overwhelmed and excited all at the same time.
Yeah.
Because it's terrifying and enlightening, you know? It's not the journey for the faint of heart. What you're teaching, Dr. Vanessa, is for that. It's possible for everyone. All you have to do is decide. Would you agree?
Thought away.
Yeah.
A thought away. Absolute transformation. And the truth of who every single one of us is, regardless of the things we've done, or, you know, all of the transgressions that we can think about along the way.
Yeah.
Regardless of all of that, the truth of who every single one of us is that we are souls. Pure potentiality, light, however you want to refer to that from your place of being, that is our truth.
Yes.
And so when you can see through that, you know, you glimpsed your mother's soul in that meditation when the image came to you of her running through the wheat field. That's the truth of who we are. Every single one of us.
I love that. We could go on and talk for the whole day, you and I. We already know this, so we won't do that to you because you're watching and tuning in here. But I think you must right now connect with Dr. Vanessa Lapointe. If you do not, you're doing yourself the greatest disservice. You don't even have to be a parent, quite frankly, for you to do this work. Like, you can still go do this work and not be a parent. I don't feel like it's limited to, I know it's about parenting, but I feel like it's parenting you.
And we all, that's it, because we've all once been children.
Yes.
And we've all once been parented. And so if we
Yes.
want to understand ourselves, we have to understand from where it is that we have come.
Yes. And so there is so Dr. Vanessa Lapointe has a ton of resources for you. And if you're watching this before September 26th, 2020, I'm going to ask her to talk to you a little bit right now about the Parenting 2.0 Summit. She's going to give you a little bit of information on that. What I'm going to do is link to that information in the show notes in the video or below the video. So can you tell us about Parenting 2.0?
Yeah, so Parenting 2.0 is the parenting course, I guess you would call it, for lack of a better descriptor, that my partner David Loist and I have co-created. And out of the Parenting 2.0 approach, which really takes the science of child development and blends it with a lot of what we have talked about today in terms of bringing consciousness to our lives as parents. It takes all of that, and once a year in September, we host a summit where we invite other presenters alongside ourselves to talk about some of the things that really are on the minds of parents these days, and to bring light to those conversations. And so this year, 2020, of course, being, a rather curious year.
Wow. I just have like 3-letter word for 2020.
That's right. That's right. And so we really are parenting in exceptional times. And so that's the theme of the summit this year. And we have Maggie Kent, who's a powerhouse of a soulful woman, parenting educator from Australia. We have Dr. Christy Goodwin, also from Australia, who's going to talk about screens, because all of our children now are experiencing, just this uptick in screen use through, Zoom and education and all of that. Transitioning to online. So she's going to be there talking with us about that. And we have Dr. Jody Carrington coming from Alberta, who is a firecracker at the and really talks about, she has this beautiful way of talking about the light up from within when it comes to living our lives in a relational kind of way. So that's going to be an incredible kind of day. Tickets are about to go on sale, and we are so excited for the 26th.
What a day. Like, what a day. The other thing I would recommend is to get on Dr. Vanessa Lapointe's mailing list. You can also follow her on Instagram and Facebook. She shares really fantastic content. And as a gift, a giveaway gift, what we'd like to do for you watching and staying with us for this long and seeing us through to the end is we are going to give away a copy of Parenting Right from the Start. And in order to enter, you need to like or comment this, make a comment below on this video, and we'll enter you in on the draw to win this fantastic book. I am so grateful for you.
Sign it back.
I'm so grateful. I appreciate you taking the time to come and meet with our community today, and for sharing yourself in such an authentic way that there's no, you're one of us, and that makes parents feel welcome and safe and being able to start their journey to grow themselves, because you make it possible for them to feel safe. So thank you for doing what you do. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on to have this conversation.
Thank you so much. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to enter the contest.